Hi folks, we're just giving everybody a few seconds to get logged in here. If you already logged in and here with us in our Zoom webinar tonight, you can open up your chat window and find some information about how to buy tonight's featured book, the Book of Atlantis Black. Good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Chelsea from Greenlight and we're excited to host tonight's event with Betsy Bonner, presenting her new book, The Book of Atlantis Black, The Search for a Sister Gone Missing. She'll be talking with Christopher Castellani, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Betsy, Christopher, and the team at Tin House for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make this space for conversation and connection. Now I just have a few housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they cannot see or hear you. They can see that you're here with us tonight though, and you can see a count of your fellow attendees on the top of your Zoom screen. The exact location depends on the type of device you're using. If you scroll over the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a couple of functions we'll be using throughout the event tonight. One of them is an icon labeled chat with one speech bubble. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. That's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and to interact with your fellow attendees. You'll also see an icon down at the bottom of your Zoom window labeled Q&A with two speech bubbles. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A module. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And if you see another attendee's question that you would really like to hear answered, you can go ahead and upvote that, and it'll float to the top of the module for our Q&A moderator when we're pulling questions to ask Betsy. We are recording tonight's event, so look for video or audio versions on our social channels later on. And importantly, tonight's featured book, The Book of Atlantis Black, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. We're excited to be able to offer actual shopping in our bookstore locations, 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday. And you can purchase Betsy's book and many others on site. Or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. We'll be posting the buy link in the chat, and if you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. Our interviewer for this evening is Christopher Castellani. He is the artistic director of Grub Street, the country's Grubhub. Just mine's on food. He's the artistic director of Grub Street, the country's largest and leading independent creative writing center. He's the author of 3 critically acclaimed novels, A Kiss from Madalena, The Saint of Lost Things, and All This Talk of Love. He's also the author of The Art of Perspective, Who Tells the Story, a collection of essays on point of view in fiction. His newest novel is Leading Men, for which he received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, MacDowell, and the Massachusetts Cultural Council. In addition to his work with Grub Street, Christopher is on the faculty and academic board of the Warren Wilson MFA program and the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. He'll be speaking with our featured author, Betsy Bonner. She's the author previously of the poetry collection Round Lake. She's a former director of the 92Y Unterberg Poetry Center, where she now teaches creative writing. She's a fellow of MacDowell and the T.S. Eliot House. She grew up in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, and now lives in southwestern Vermont. Greenlight has worked with Betsy on our Brooklyn Voices literary event series at St. Joseph's College. In her capacity as part of the creative writing faculty, she has often introduced our events. So it's a pleasure to have the chance to introduce her to present her own book tonight. Her new book, The Book of Atlantis Black, follows Betsy Bonner's search for her sister, Atlantis, and the unraveling of the mysterious final months before Atlantis's disappearance, alleged overdose, and death. This haunting memoir and piercing true crime account will have you questioning facts, rooting for secrets, and asking what it means to know the truth. Betsy is going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then she'll be talking with Christopher and with all of you. Christopher and Betsy, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, and thank you, Greenlight, for having both of us here tonight. And most of all, thank you so much to Betsy for writing this incredible book and for bringing it into the world for us to read, for sharing such a personal story so artfully. So the main thing I'm here to do is to congratulate you on this incredible accomplishment. I read this book over a weekend many months ago, as soon as I got the galley. It has the propulsiveness of a page-turning mystery, as Chelsea just mentioned, with sort of characters who I know are real people, seemingly out of literary fiction, and prose that's lyrical without being self-conscious or overly showy. And you've achieved such a delicate balance here, and I can't wait to find out how you did it. So those are the sorts of questions I'll be asking you. But before we get to my questions, I know you have a reading to share with us, which is so exciting, and a slideshow that goes with the reading. So I am going to screen share. We're going to hope that this works, and I'm going to screen share, and I hope you'll shout out if something goes wrong, because I can't see what happens once we do this. But let's see. Okay, and there we go. Do we see what we need to see?
We do.
Excellent.
Chris, thank you so much for joining on a DNC night, Greenlight. It was always a dream. And I know since we can't all be together in the same room, this is the next best thing. So let's do the reading and then talk. I think that looks good.
Yes.
This is from chapter 6. I pieced together a few different parts of chapter 6, and I wanted to start with you. Chris was 21, gorgeous, fresh out of Swarthmore College, and the youngest teacher our school had ever hired. He was the first teacher who lent me books from his private collection, Sylvia Plath, James Baldwin, and Anne Sexton. I told my friend Tara that I was in love. "Oh, Betsy, no," she said. "He's so gay." "He mentioned a girlfriend in Wilmington," I said. "That's just so the jocks won't kill him." All year, I tried to entice Chris with my purple prose, wishing he would deflower me, a word and concept I've gotten from V.C. Andrews. He left Unionville after a year and went on to have a successful writing career, but he stayed in touch and recommended me to my first choice colleges. During Atlantis's first semester at Loyola, she'd found work as a waitress at a strip club. In her second semester, she dropped out and moved to Los Angeles. College wasn't very interesting, she said, and she wanted to focus on making music. I was worried when she told me that she'd taken yet another name, Roxanne, for a phone sex job, but she said it was the easiest money she'd ever made in her life and that none of the girls took it seriously. In my last month of senior year, Atlantis called from a payphone in Albuquerque and said she was on her way home. She'd had it with Los Angeles. She'd yelled at a guy who was getting disgusting on the phone and told him she was a 300-pound lesbian and that he must have a tiny dick. She'd pawned everything she could, and would be home in 3 days. She needed a free place to live and hoped to earn some quick cash in Chadds Ford before moving to New York. 3 days later, I came home from school, saw the Alpha in the driveway, and found Atlantis sacked out in the living room with a Sybil Shepherd movie on the TV. In the year and a half since we'd seen each other, she'd grown her hair to her waist. She wore the same heavy eyeliner and mascara whose application she'd perfected in high school, but no foundation, blush, or lipstick, just a thin dusting of powder. She was still enviably thin. "You look good," I said. "It's the desert," she said. "You have to go there. The dry heat is amazing, actually clears up your skin. Though of all the places I've been, you'd love Northern California. You applied to Stanford, right?" "I'm going to Sarah Lawrence," I said. "They offered me a small scholarship." "What, are you a dyke now?" she said. "Oh, I have something for you." The laminated card she put in my hand said Atlantis Black was born in 1974, 2 years before her actual birth, and had black hair and brown eyes. The photograph showed her tilting her head down to hide the Irish double chin she'd inherited from our father. She no longer needed that particular ID, she said, and I could use it if I ever wanted to go out in Philadelphia or New York. I shouldn't worry about the eye color, which was a mistake anyway, because no one ever checked in the dark. We still looked alike, mostly because of our long dark hair, which we wore loose down our backs. I told her I didn't care about bars and certainly didn't want to get caught sneaking into one. "It must be nice to be so straight," she said. "You better keep it just in case." She talked her way into a telemarketing job, which earned her more money than most 19-year-olds made in our town. I had no idea how she spent her time when she wasn't at work until I came home one afternoon and caught her at the living room window peering through binoculars at one of our new neighbors, a 14-year-old girl next door. The girl next door was in her yard by the wading pool, playing with her kid sister. Like a little mother, she lifted her sister up and out of the water and then dunked her back in. We lived close enough to hear their screen door open and close, and when their mom came out in chino shorts carrying a tray of snacks and lemonade, I saw Atlantis's body tense. I watched her watching their mom set the tray by the pool's edge and open her arms to the child in the water. The girl next door threw a towel in their direction and curled into a sagging lawn chair with Adelia's catalog. "Do you think she's straight?" my sister said. "They are all straight," I said. "She has wicked thighs," she said. "She's in 8th grade," I said, "on the cusp of teenage dreams. Doesn't their mom look exactly like Lana Turner in The Postman Always Rings Twice?" In an attempt to distract ourselves from the humidity, we'd been staying up late watching the Bravo network. I sneaked a peek at their mom's long tanned legs myself. "You didn't even know who Lana Turner was until I told you." "What color do you think her eyes are?" my sister said. "Don't know. Brown hair, brown eyes, I guess." "Wrong. She has black eyes." "There's no such thing," I said. At her age, I was getting drunk and having sex with those assholes in the Burger King parking lot, Atlantis said. "I can't believe her mom lets her wear hot pants to school." I tossed my sassy magazine on the coffee table. "I'm going to write her a letter," she said, "something from the wolf to make her wet." Lately, she had become fixated on some entity that possessed her, which she called the beast or the wolf. "She'll think it's from a guy," I said. "Duh," she picked up her guitar. "I'll address it to her soul."
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening.
So as we're talking, I have some, as you know, I have some questions for you. And as we're talking, as Chelsea mentioned, I hope that people will put questions using the Q&A function. And if that is somehow confusing, they can put it in, you all can put it in the chat. I want to just start, Betsy, with, by the way, I somehow didn't realize that you were going to start with our connection. I love it. I'm so proud to be in this book. And I'm so proud to have been your high school English and public speaking teacher. And I knew then, anyone who's a teacher out there, when you have a student who is special and who has an incredible talent, and you see how it shines through. And I always knew that you were bound to do something incredible, and I was right. So this is just so much fun for me to be here with you 25 years later, although I shouldn't even say that. but anyway, it's just such a pleasure. But I want to start. Sorry. Go ahead.
If I can interrupt, you were a lot more than my high school English teacher. So yeah, 25 years down the line, and I know my Aunt Tina is here, and I think my friend Tara, whom I just mentioned, and a handful of folks from Chadds Ford, in addition to other places. So
awesome. Shout out
all them too.
Exactly. Awesome. And yes, I mean, it's been so great to have stayed in touch with you over the years. But I wanted to start with really the most basic question, is just to tell us really how this book came together, how long it took you to work on it, the actual book, the actual writing of it, and how it kind of developed and changed over the course of the process of writing it. That's a lot of hows, how did this come together? And I'd love it at some point also to just tell us a little bit about the why. What is the main thing you wanted your readers to get from, or the main things you wanted your readers to get from this book?
Those are excellent questions, and I've been racking my brain. How did that happen?
Right.
What I definitely remember is starting writing the memoir in 2012. Okay, and so 2012. That's 4 years after really the inciting incidents, or the devastating losses that I had. During those 4 years, I was teaching and I was traveling, and I had no inclination to write a memoir. And a friend told me about a trip to Kenya that I could join. It was a group at Stony Brook, Southampton, and it was being led by Julie Sheehan, the poet, and Bob Holman. They were bringing a group of MFA students. I was not an MFA student. I had gotten my MFA in poetry years and years before that. But my friend thought, this is an interesting group of people, and I think you would like them, and they're going to be doing something with poetry and the oral tradition. You'll get to go to Dr. Richard Leakey's Institute in the Turkana Basin. So how could I say no? But I didn't know that I was going with a group of memoirists. It was, sure, we were studying poetry, but it turned out at dinner every night, the students there, they were listening to the sounds of the desert, and we were certainly sort of doing some musical things as well as writing poetry, but they all were writing memoirs. And I got to hear what they thought their memoirs were about. And it was absolutely fascinating. I remember a woman who had lost her hearing, I think at the age of 8, and was, through technology, was getting her hearing back and hearing symphonies for the first time. So I came back in 2012. So that was a trip in January. And that was after going on some safaris and looking at wild animals, hearing elephants squish into this. It was just astonishing. And I came back and I looked in my poetry notebooks and I saw that I was writing prose. And for a little while I was trapped. The first thing I was writing was really what became the very first page of the book, I realize now. So I was trying to go into that hotel room, a very dark place, the darkest place I could imagine, where it appeared that my sister had been found dead and we didn't understand. I didn't understand. So it started with that, and then I found myself writing childhood scenes. So that's the other thing I wanted to say from a sort of technical point of view. There's a moment in the present tense in the middle of the book where my sister and I are children sledding in the snow, and those kinds of memories were coming back after that. I hope that's helpful. I think I sort of danced around a lot of the different things, but absolutely the memoir, the trip with memoirists made a difference. It made a difference hearing these other people.
And was so in a way, you were sort of an accidental memoirist, right? It was peer pressure. You became a memoirist out of peer pressure.
Oh, I mean, how could I hold my head up? Yeah, that's it's totally true. I didn't set out to do it until I did. And the other thing I would say, as I was writing those vignettes, really is how I thought of them. I shared them with, I brought them to one writing group, and it was actually a group of all men and then one woman and then me. And I noticed that the woman understood like that I was writing a memoir, which was interesting to me. I didn't know if it was prose poetry or what. And then sharing it with very close writer friends, my friend Rachel King said to me, you should write an article, right? You should write some kind of article about the Tijuana stuff. And I tried, and that became a personal essay that I published in a small magazine, yeah.
And I apologize if I'm getting the timeline wrong, but so your first book of poems came out when?
They came out in 2016. They were accepted in 2015, and I was already well on the way to writing the Book of Atlantis Black. I was well on the way to doing that. And I would send my manuscript out, my poetry manuscript, but it wasn't my focus when it got accepted. Then, and Martha Rhodes of Four Way Books is the editor who accepted that. So it was actually kind of fascinating to go back into the poetry after I had to do edits and to write some new poems really for the book, as we all do. It's rarely just finished manuscript. If it's a year and a half goes by, you're going to make some changes.
And how much, if any, of Atlantis was in your poems?
Quite a bit. Though I didn't use her name Atlantis because that would have been so confusing. So there's a lot of my sister in my book of poems. There are other, characters. My mother is in the poems. There are Greece poems. I was living in Greece, really when my sister was arrested and all, like sort of her life was falling apart. I was in Greece, and some of those poems came from that time too. Some were from, had origins at Columbia University in 2000 to 2002. Very long process. Yeah.
No, and the reason I ask is, because it seems like this is the type of book that comes out of an obsession of some sort, right? It's something, you don't write a book like this unless it is something that you are personally, that you're wrestling with and that you can't shake, right? And it seemed, and I'm not surprised, obviously, that your sister and your mother are parts, that you had already written about them, and that you weren't finished with them, right? And that you had to figure out a way to write about them in a different way in order to sort of complete, or not complete, but to continue the story of your relationship with them. This book really pulls off like a very delicate calibration, which I think we saw in the reading. It's like, we didn't see this part of it in particular, but it's sort of part like police procedural, part lyric memoir, part biography, told in a collage form, jumps back and forth in time, often multiple time periods within the same section. And it's also a book in a way in which we sort of know the ending from the beginning, and yet there's suspense throughout the entire book. And so you've done something really, I think, remarkable. And then, as you know, being able to put all of those elements together in a kind of form that, it's also interspersed with, with Atlantis's own voice in this interview, that in these kind of interstitial chapters. So she's kind of going along with you on this. And I just wanted to point out just what a really smart kind of narrative strategy you had for this book, in the sense that it was able to contain all these different types of writing and types of, contain all these multitudes. That was the perfect way of kind of communicating how pervasive this obsession, if I'm just calling it an obsession, I don't know if you agree with it, what obsession was in your life. I just thought, and I just was curious, was it always going to be this kind of collage form, always back and forth in time, or was it ever a straighter, there are editors who would say you have to tell this straight, this is too, this is jumping around too much, readers can't follow it. Whatever. That's not the case, but I'm saying sometimes editors say that. So I'm just curious, how, whether you had that form from the beginning and how it changed.
Yeah, thank you for saying those things. So it was important to me first I'll say, when someone is gone from your life and you have these bits of ephemera that you discover, I think a lot of us, in fact, have these, a box of journals, or, we find what my agent and I were calling ghost tracks. So little breadcrumbs that people have left, things you didn't know. And it became important to me. I had so much of my sister's voice. I had her songs. I had attended countless shows of hers in New York and also in California, in San Francisco. And I didn't want to change her words. I did give myself the freedom to imagine scenes, right, and to recreate from memory, such as what I read this evening. And so in I guess, as succinctly as I can, I had what I was calling ghost tracks, and they were the italicized passages. And in the book, Tin House did a very elegant job having black pages, which it could have gone either way, and I think it turned out beautiful. My jaw dropped when the book, showed up. But that's also just to indicate this is a dead person speaking, right? This is someone, and it was very important to keep, not to change those words. So the other thing, I think, technique-wise, I would say, I went ahead after I had the whole draft. What I imagined was complete. Then I organized it. Chronological order doesn't really make any sense, and it's imaginary, right, as a concept. But I put all of my mother stuff in with my mother and parents. It was, not the way I was going to tell it, knowing that. And then I was able, with the help, of course, of my editor and writer friends, of course, to place a separate narrative, right? So you can read just my sister's narrative on its own. And when that was falling into place, it was more ambitious than I even thought I could be. I'm glad it worked for you as a reader.
It definitely did. It does, the way you just described it, it does follow these many different tracks, throughout. There's, there's the sort of mystery story, there's the sort of, the mother story, there's the, your own story, and all of it kind of, and I'm being very reductive here, but it does have these tracks that have, and that kind of intersect and are all, and I guess, I don't want to, just repeat what you just said, but it feels very intentional, and that comes through in the book. I've read, those people out there who are writers, I'm sure there are many viewers / listeners who are writers out there. And I think we get so overwhelmed by, anyone writing memoir gets so overwhelmed by just how much life there is to try to distill or sift through, and in this case, there are so many lives. And I really, again, the way you did it in terms of telling these vignettes and stringing them together in these tracks, I thought was really effective. on, along those lines, like, I think like the title is very sly because, Atlantis is the heart of this story. She operates as both kind of the focus of the story, but also as the sort of hole in the middle of the story, or the lacuna, whatever you want to say, like this unknowable center at the heart of the story. But every book is ultimately about its narrator, right? This is really, it's Atlantis' story, but it's really your story, right? Your family, how you and Atlantis were both formed, by your parents, by the Wyeth country in which you were born, where you grew up. So did you sort of know that you were doing that when you started out, that it was going to sort of be about you? Is that what you originally intended, or is my interpretation off? Like, because again, like, I think people might pick this up thinking, oh, it's just about this, it's about this mystery about the sister, but also it's about so much more. It's really a family portrait in many ways. So.
I'm so relieved that you see it that way, and that is how I intend it, and you nailed it. Part of the process was just as organizing it chronologically, knowing that's not the way I would actually have constructed the book. I erased myself pretty much in sort of a middle draft. It was all about Atlantis, and my strategy was follow Atlantis. I mean, ultimately, I wrote this book for my mother as much as for her, perhaps more so. But the strategy was follow Atlantis, and whenever I start going into some irrelevant thing or other, as you know, I let myself write it down, but I would just cut it out. So I think that ended up working. Of course, I had to bring myself back in, and as you know from the book, my sister wanted someone to write a book about her. She wasn't going to do it herself. So it has to be the Book of Atlantis Black. She even referred to the book that she imagined someone, a particular friend of hers, the wonderful Colleen Kane, she tasked her with that. And of course, who's going to do that? You can't tell someone, write a book about me, by the way, and here are all my passwords. But anyway, I think I erased myself and then brought myself back in. Not that there ever wasn't an I, but you're absolutely right that sort of tracking her and following her was the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's about it's a lot about you, a lot about your mother, and a lot about Atlantis, but it's about Atlantis the way that you saw her, right? It's her, but it's your interpretation of her, which every biography is on some level, right? And she definitely, from reading, I mean, I so wish that I had the chance, to meet her in person, because reading the book, she leaps off the page, and I mean, every character does, but obviously she being the dramatic, and what's the expression, like chewing the scenery, like she's the person who chews the scenery, on stage, and she just sort of like begs you to want to talk about, to want to write about her, and what comes through so much is sort of, and we all don't have people exactly like her in our lives, but we have, I think many of us have people like her in our lives who demand so much attention, who are so maddening and so kind of they uncatchable, right? And in an interesting way, like so much of that frustration with her comes through in the book as much as the sort of love letter that this book is to her. It's both like a, how can you be so maddening and how can I love you so much kind of experience that one has reading this book. And I think I just wanted to, it's not a question, I just wanted to sort of say how much I appreciated that as well. And I don't know if you have any response, and if that calls forth a response, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, it makes me want to cry because I'm so, it's that, of course I was furious, and I did write out of rage in addition to writing out of love. So of course everyone, people are multifaceted, they're never just one thing, but I think balancing as best I could the love and how much I wanted for her, and then the rage at what became of my mother, and really what I was left with. So
Exactly.
thank you for saying that.
And as the writer, I mean, you're the one who gets, like, you get the last word, right? In a way, on all of this, you know? And I wonder kind of how you, I mean, I feel like we're in a therapy session, but like, how do you, like that I caused, and I apologize for that, but I'm curious, like, about, you know, the fact that you as the writer, this privileged position in a way that you're in, that you get to tell this story, and kind of, I mean, I don't think you should have any feelings of guilt or anxiety about these things, but I'm wondering, like, just how you feel about just the act of, these people are no longer, we assume, no longer with us, your mother and Atlantis, and whether, how much or if at all you struggled with, can I even tell like their story without their permission or whatever?
Oh, for sure. The responsibility in memoir, it feels huge. I also felt responsible. There are living family members in this book, and it was interesting when I finally felt ready to share drafts with them. You know, I wanted so very much for us all to remember the same things, and you know that we know in fiction as well, people can lose entire friendships and relationships and spouses. You know, a lot of people don't want to be written about. So yes, I had fidelity to the truth. I had the responsibility of telling something the way I saw it, but I also, I didn't want to mar anyone's memory in terms of tarnish. I didn't want to do that, but I had to be honest. It would have been a horribly boring book if I didn't go into some of the real dark places that Atlantis went to in particular.
And you frame it as, you know, you always frame it as, I am telling what I understand of this story. I'm telling what I know, what I experienced, never speaking for her or for really anyone in your family, but your own experience is your own, and no one can take that away from you, right? I mean, so in a way, it's, again, it goes back to whose story this is. Like, it's your story, even though these other people are characters in them. It's ultimately your interpretation of them.
Very, very, very smart, Chris. That's a very smart observation. And I would add, then there are the times when people lie to us, right? And when we figure out that they were lying. So there's a moment in the book when Atlantis is leaving me. She's left me a voicemail, and it's towards the end of part 2, and she's pretty much about to flee the country. And she says to me on the voicemail, Gretchen is actually a really good person. And Gretchen was not a good person, to put it mildly. I believe Atlantis was lying to me. I also believe that she had a figurative gun to her head when she told me that lie. So yes, with memoir, you know, it can't just be what the person told you. It has to be what you understand the subtext is. What they are not saying is, of course, even more important sometimes than what they say.
Absolutely. I wonder if you can tell how much, I don't know how much you want to give away, but for those readers who haven't read the book yet, I wonder if you can just sort of tell us a little bit about Gretchen, and because she's an important figure in this book, and especially toward the end, and I wonder how much you want to say about her as a person.
I would say she is a manipulative, sinister person. I don't know
who she is, right?
I don't know who she is. She uses multiple names, or used multiple names, just as my sister did. I mean, on the one hand, my sister finally found someone who was crazier than she was, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of darkness around Gretchen. The fact that she reached out to both my mother and then to me, So to my mother after Atlantis was gone, and to me after my mother was gone. And none of our friends or family members had ever met her. So that's, yeah, there's a lot that I don't know. And that was also a difficulty in ending the book. I can say this, I didn't have all of the information that I needed for part 3. I only had really parts 1 and 2 and up through the beginning of 3, but I couldn't end part 3 until I went ahead and did the investigative work of going ahead and reaching out to Gretchen and to some other people, knowing that even if she told the truth, I'd have no way of knowing it, but making myself sit through, well, I'll hear what she says, I'll record that in my book, and that will be that. You know, there's, yeah, on the one hand, it almost wouldn't have worked if there had been resolution, though if there ever is, I was telling Jeannie Vanesco last week, I would of course write an afterword, if, you know, short of a confession. I don't think that we're going to know. I think it would be impossible to know. Yeah.
And at least 2 people have asked if you've heard from Gretchen since the book came out, and is that the answer is no to that?
The answer is no. The answer is no. There are people on Facebook, and you never really know if you've never met them before. But no, I haven't personally.
Okay. Yeah, but you have heard from other people, right? Since the book has come out, I read somewhere where you had written that people, friends of Atlantis and people she performed with, or if I'm maybe misremembering, but people have reached out to you. So before we go to the audience questions, I wanted to ask my last question, if you could tell people a little bit about the response that you've gotten. I mean, the book hasn't been out that long, but you've already heard from people, right, who were connected to your sister.
It's been just amazing. And it actually, I mean, the memoir writing process is grueling, right? When you're actually doing the work, and when you're reporting on some trauma, and you're right to say it can feel like a therapy session, talking about what it is to write a memoir. But then after you have it finished and people read it, I mean, it's been miraculous. People I was good friends with in 8th grade, you know, people my sister played music with in California, certainly in New York. And then tomorrow, Atlantis's partner of 5 years, Leah Jackson, she and I are going to be on the radio, Channel Q. Actually, we're recording it tomorrow, and we're going to be on Wednesday. But sending her the book when I had the advanced reader's copy, and Chris, okay, it almost froze for a second, but you're still there.
Yeah, you were frozen for me for a little bit, but I don't know if I was frozen for you.
We do our best. You and I can also go on the radio sometime if you ever would like. But yeah, Leah, becoming close to her, going through Atlantis's musical archive with her very good friend, Tim Adams, who was her guitarist, and who happens to be, he's a singer-songwriter, musician, but he happens to be really good at this library science stuff. So he's been cataloging everything Atlantis did musically, and there is music that no one has heard yet that we're bringing out into the world through her dream producer, Steve Lyon. So that's a labor of love, and that's sort of, yeah, the album More Than Opium, it takes on a couple of different meanings in my book, but that is only 3 songs away from being finished by the producer, Steve Lyon. It's, you know, it's something that Atlantis talks about in the memoir, that she just couldn't finish this second album. And it's kind of amazing that it's going to exist in the world very, very soon.
That's incredible. I mean, and we're going to get to, you know, have that, which is, you know, a direct result of your work. And that's so, I mean, it's her work that now we're going to be able to see thanks to this process. That's amazing. And someone asks whether you feel, and I think you addressed this, but that whether you feel like she might actually still be alive and that she might surface one day. Are you comfortable answering that, or?
Oh, of course I'm comfortable, my God. Thanks for asking. I don't think so. I truly don't think so. I think it's impossible to know. But I believe I would have heard from her. It's been 12 years.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's another, I'm going to sneak in another one of my sort of questions here before we get back to the audience questions, where I think this book is in a way like so much about not knowing, or so much about not being able to know or to have any kind of resolution, not any kind, but not to have all, like, not to rely on resolution for understanding, right? That it asks us to kind of, it asks us to have negative, negative capability, right? To be able to thrive in uncertainty, or to be able to exist peacefully in uncertainty. And normally when we're writing about, when we're writing about anything, whether it's a novel or a memoir or a poem, we kind of, like, we're doing it because we have something to say about something that we know, right? And you're writing so much about something that you don't know, right? You're kind of writing in order to figure it out, and you're asking the reader to sort of be comfortable with the fact that, and I think this is clear from the marketing, that we don't actually ever know, like this is a mystery in which we know almost less at the end than we do at the beginning, right? About what happened, and we have to sort of sit with that. And even though we're turning the pages to find out what happens, we actually don't have that resolution. And so again, I guess not really a question, but I guess the question would be how, did you struggle with that, I guess, when writing it, to sort of say, well, what is this all kind of adding up to, right? If I can't give the readers like a resolution, right? Is it going to be unsatisfying? I don't know. I don't really know what I'm asking, except that I found it interesting that it's a book that was so satisfying, and yet, as I said, we know almost less at the beginning about, or there are more questions at the end than there are at the beginning. So.
It's, I think, so much about character, right? Mm-hmm. So in the end, plot doesn't even matter, right? What matters is to create that fire-breathing character. And of course, I missed both my sister and mother. I missed them. So writing it for that reason, but in no way did I want to just do something that's eulogizing or, saying, oh, her music was great. No, some of her music was great. Some of her music is unlistenable, and it's never going to be to everyone's taste. But the fact of a life, right, and an archive. So yeah, I certainly, I can share, I struggled in the beginning, both to find an agent and to find an editor, but I heard so many encouraging words with every submission. They would say, okay, but we need some kind of resolution, or
how interesting. Yeah.
This is not a detective book, and yet I wanted it to be part biography, as you said. I wanted it to be a hybrid. So yes, it was sort of unclassifiable, I think, for a little while. And then I found my agent, thank God, and she found Maisie Cochran at Tin House, thank God.
Absolutely. That's such a credit to Tin House, because, yeah, I mean, it's so hard to sell books to a publisher that are, as you say, uncategorizable, right? They want to immediately say it's this book meets that book, right? It's they want to put it, they want to know exactly where to put it on the bookshelf, right? But of course, this type of book, something that is surprising, it kind of resists categorization, are the books that we love, right? They're the books that writers and artists and readers actually really love. And it's the kind of book I think Atlantis herself, would have loved, right? In the sense that it's a book that doesn't sugarcoat anything. I love that so many of the wonderful reviews have used the word unsentimental, right? Because there really is not a sentimental line in this book, and that is also something very hard to do when you're writing about a loved one, multiple loved ones, and especially as you're writing about grief. And so that is amazing in itself. So it's like, that is a difficult book. It's a difficult book to sort of sell meaning like to a publisher, but it's exactly the kind of book that when you read it, and this is exactly the experience I had with it. When I read it, I thought, okay, I need to tell so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so about it, because they have the sensibility to appreciate it and to love it. So I'm so happy that Maisie and Tin House and your agent exist. Let me see if we have time for. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. Many of these we have answered a bit. I'm gonna try about. I guess, do you have any advice for, like, since we were just talking about writing, do you have any advice for the people out there who, I know you probably have former students and I know there are aspiring writers out there, in terms of, do you have advice for how to push through if they do have a story like this that they're wrestling with, and how, do you have any specific advice, for them, and tell us like what you wish you'd have known before you started this whole process. Maybe that's a way of putting it.
That's great. I'm going to think about it. Certainly for myself, finding readers. So I mentioned finding, we say, a community of writers. How do you find them? I took writing workshops and I went to readings, went to talks, So also just for me, I read everything that was contemporary on all of those sort of, top whatever list. I mean, even if any memoir got a lot of attention, I read it, even if the story didn't sound that interesting to me. And not everyone would do this. I don't know if it's good advice for someone. So in other words, I had studied poetry, not memoir, and I had to learn it. So community, read, and find your readers, the people who ask you the questions that make you go deeper. I think that helped more than anything. Of course, I wanted to give up. And it was these are some years that went by, and I didn't think it would see the light of day. I hoped it would. But I didn't write specifically with the goal of publishing. I wrote it, as you say, I mean, it didn't feel like I had a choice. So finding the readers who ask you the good questions, however you can do it.
I love it. That's great. And somebody asked something I was also wanting to ask, which was the sort of move from, like, you basically you have a degree in poetry, but you're writing prose, like, and somebody asks whether that was difficult to transition from poetry to prose, and whether the vignette style that you chose was a way of combining what this reader calls the overarching quality of narrative, like beginning, moving to ending, with the ephemerality and mystery of poetry. Like whether kind of what you've done is sort of almost like a hybrid, but whether you struggled at all. You said you read a lot of memoirs. Was that your education for how to do this?
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked, because I was speaking with a friend from Columbia University who is an amazing poet, and was I was very close to her at one point, and she said, I read this and I saw Lucy Broido's editing like throughout. Of course, Lucy was dead by the time I was doing this, but right. Lucy taught us to strip everything down, use couplets, white space. Whereas Richard Howard, who was also my teacher, and who gave me the best books, he taught the best sort of, there was a seminar called Relentless, Virginia Woolf's The Waves, so getting these
exact opposite, right?
Yeah, and then there was Frivolity, so over the top. Just putting two different things up against each other, and it's what we do in poetry. And I think that training absolutely helped with this.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, we're at 8 o'clock, so believe it or not. And so I just wanted to thank you and congratulate you one more time. And I wanted to thank the readers and the people who are here tonight, and to encourage you all one more time to buy your books from Greenlight Bookstore. Buy this book in particular from Greenlight Bookstore. And Betsy, if people wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that? If they have questions, if they have a fan letter, if they somehow know something about Atlantis, like what's the best way to reach you?
That's great. I think the Atlantis Facebook page that has Facebook Messenger for people who use Facebook.
Okay.
I also have a work address at St. Joseph's College. So I'm Grace Bonner, of course.
Can I write that in the chat? Grace Bonner at.
But it's G Bonner,
Bonner
at S as in Sam. It's St. Joseph's College, New York.edu. So sjcny.edu. And I also wanted to say, in terms of training, I had the best high school English teacher ever. So what trained me, I mean, we read amazing books together. But anyway, yeah, the Facebook page, I have one, and then we have one for Atlantis's music. So that's an easy way. And I'd love to hear from people. I would absolutely love that.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Certainly happy readers they should be sending you, fan letters. So this was such a pleasure for me, and I just, again, thank you so much for writing this book and for being here, and thank you again to Greenlight. I don't know how there she is.
Yeah, hi.
Transition out of here, but yes.
Thank you so much, Christopher and Betsy, for tonight's lovely conversation, for taking this time to speak with all of us tonight. And thank you again to everyone who came out and joined us. A reminder that you can buy Betsy's book at Greenlight Bookstore, in store 12 to 6, Tuesday through Saturday, or online at greenlightbookstore.com for pickup at either of our stores or for shipping anywhere in the US. And if you missed any part of tonight's event, or you just want to rewatch, or you want to share it with friends and family who missed it tonight, it'll be up on Greenlight's YouTube channel, Greenlight Bookstore, in the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us this evening, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Bye.
Thank you again. Good night. Thank you.